And something else that we are waiting to happen for on Monday is for the district attorney's office and a judge to unseal that arrest affidavit for Chris Watts. In it, we could learn more about the possible motive and how the three died.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. So the clip you've just heard is the Denver Channel's Megan Lopez, and she was talking on around about the 20th of August 2018, and that is the date that this blog post was written. It's time to talk about why. And you sort of get a sort of a sense that that is what the media were touching on, if lightly, saying something along the lines of, motives still unclear. And as early as the 18th of August, which predated that blog post by 2 days, ABC News was saying motive a mystery in Colorado man's alleged killing of pregnant wife and 2 young daughters. So I think it's important to stress that on the 18th of August, the media were talking about motive even before the arrest affidavit had been released. And on the 20th, they were continuing to sort of report on it. And the affidavit was imminent. It was about to be released when this particular blog post was written.
Sources say the little girls were hidden inside of an oil tank. Chris Watts also appeared in court for the first time that day, going from concerned father in a Carolina Tar Heels shirt to a triple murder suspect in an orange jumpsuit and shackles. He'll appear in court again on Tuesday, but before that happens, the DA's office is expected to file formal charges on Monday. And tonight, family, friends, and the Frederick community will honor Shanann, Bella, and Cece, forever etched in these photos of happier times.
When you're closer with the family, it's the why. The why gets bigger.
And so in that same video clip, this is also from the Denver Channel, and I'll put a link up to it in the description. You can actually hear a short clip from Jeremy Lindstrom saying, for us that were close to these people, and of course he was close to Shanann, their children were at the same birthday party the day before. And also he was quite close to Chris Watts. They had been former co-workers. In fact, Shanann had worked with him at one stage, and Chris Watts had been sort of also employed by the same company. He was also talking about the why. Why did this happen? And this is emphasized again in the same clip from Denver 7. Let's listen in.
And further complicating this case is the lack of a motive right now. According to family friends, everything seemed normal. Christopher Watts even took his 2 daughters to a birthday party on Sunday. Jeremy Lindstrom says his good friend seemed happy.
The hardest part about it all is when you're closer with the family, it's the why. The why gets bigger.
Now, at the same time that you heard these ruminations, speculations, and so on the Denver Channel, you also had the guy who actually did the recording of the Sermon on the Porch from Denver 7 also expressing his thoughts.
Prosecutors believe Shanann and the girls were killed in the house, but are being tight-lipped on further details, and Watts has not entered a plea. Financial records do show the couple filed bankruptcy back in 2015. Their current financial status is unclear.
What bothered me the most is that, the guy looked at the camera and was asking his wife and kids to come back, and he knows that they're not coming back.
Sources tell ABC News Shanann and Chris had a troubled marriage, but on Facebook, Shanann gave no indication of trouble in this video posted in May.
And so my question on August the 20th was, the media still don't know why Chris Watts committed this crime. Who does? Do we have to wait for prosecutors to tell us Chris Watts' motive, or can we figure it out on our own? And the same applies to the Morphew case. That's where we are right now. The affidavit's not been released. In fact, we've just heard that it's not going to be released for probably another 2.5 months. We might see it, this unusually detailed affidavit, we might see it around about the 1st of September. So, in the Watts case, it maybe took a week for it to be released. In this case, in the Morphew case, it might take, 2.5 months after the the 1 year anniversary. So so, in terms of the Chris Watts case, already on the 20th, so basically a week after the crime happened, I was saying it's time to ask why, right? And I said, if we can't figure out on our own Chris Watts' motive, what does that say about our ability to intuit the thoughts, desires, and machinations of those around us? Meaning, if we can't figure out why in terms of this crime that is being publicized, where a lot of reports are coming out, we just heard about the financial situation and so on, Shanann posting about this perfect life on Facebook. If we can't look beyond that and intuit what's really going on, how can we deal with our own lives? If we can't look into the lives of others, how can we look into our own lives? And I think it works both ways. If we can't look into our own lives, how can we look into others? How can we look into true crime? How can we be true crime rocket scientists? How can we be authentic and reliable in our judgments? If we can't figure out hypothetical catastrophes in other folks' families, in other words, in terms of true crime, do we have any chance of piecing the puzzles, hidden and less hidden, of the motives of those that are part of the fabric of our lives? What true crime offers is a series of precedents and templates. The criminal psychology is never a new journey, although some tangents along the way may be a little unusual or even novel. So in other words, even the Barry Morphew case, it's not a new journey. Some of the tangents may be a little different or novel, but the whole thing is never something without precedent and previous templates, previous intertextualities in terms of true crime. So I wrote the best place to start in order to fathom a motive for Watts is Scott Peterson. There are many similarities: pregnant wife, business trips, Mr. Perfect persona or golden boy, golden child, a picture perfect marriage and family, fairy tale home, sunny smiles all round, versus fertilizer/oil selling, foreclosure. When I said selling, I kind of meant someone who is involved in sales, foreclosure, financial ruin, her earning more than him, and the collapse of the picture perfect charade. Now, her earning more than him was basically a suggestion of that, right? Or certainly a scenario where one is earning more than the other. There's also a lot of vanity in both marriages. There's also a lot of shallowness. Under the vanity, there's no real warmth, just empty words. And I quoted there, after reading the post, one of Shanann's friends commented that Shanann had a storybook life. And it's something also mentioned by the media that, apparently on social media, they had this picture perfect marriage. And so wasn't that part of the problem, this attempt to keeping up appearances? And obviously that is something that we establish later on. Of course, to intuit a motive in the Watts case requires that we went to the trouble to figure out Scott Peterson's motive. Did we? Was Scott's motive that he wanted to have an affair? I hope that's not your answer, because millions of married folk cheat on each other quite happily without resorting to murder. The affair was a factor, and I believe it was a factor with Watts. And I think what is really interesting on this particular point, stressed on the 20th of August 2018, so almost 3 years ago, was that the affair was a factor, but I hope that's not your answer, because millions of people have affairs. And there's one particular channel, I think we all know who I'm talking about, there's one particular channel who is fixated on the affair and fixated on demonizing Nicole Kessinger, trying to make that the entire reason for Chris Watts doing what he did, when people are having affairs all the time, and yet he's never gravitated beyond that particular aspect. So the affair, yes, it was a factor, and I believe it was a factor with Watts, and we later found out that it was a factor. Both good-looking, charming, and facile men, Chris Watts and Scott Peterson, in both cases, women who knew or should have known their husbands were cheating, but kept up the pretense that everything was just fine, including through the new pregnancy. And this is what made it so hard to sort of investigate the case. It was quite difficult to go to the victim herself and to try and go through things that she'd said to friends or things that she'd said on social media and get the truth from that source, if that makes sense. In other words, if you went to the victim herself, what you got was an appearance that everything was fine, and was it? And so, it's contrary to the image of Shanann painted. This was actually reported in the media, that what was actually going on was contrary to the image Shanann was painting of her marriage on social media. And so Chris Watts, when he committed this crime, may have thought, you know what, he's been given a clean bill of health on Shanann's social media. No one's going to suspect him. And wasn't he right about that? Wasn't his best alibi, in a weird way, Shanann? And even his in-laws, even his parents, where, she described her husband as my amazing, supportive hubby and my best friend, my soulmate, in posts within the last year. This is something even the media picked up on.
Financial records do show the couple filed bankruptcy back in 2015. Their current financial status is unclear.
What bothered me the most is that, the guy looked at the camera and was asking his wife and kids to come back, and he knows that they're not coming back.
Sources tell ABC News Shanann and Chris had a troubled marriage, but on Facebook, Shanann gave no indication of trouble in this video posted in May.
He stuck around, and he stuck around because he was the one for me, and he is amazing.
The idea that somebody could actually kill their own young children, probably eyeball to eyeball, is just really off the charts. The level of evil in these type of crimes is way over the top.
I've got to say I disagree with that assessment, which was made on the 18th of August. This video from ABC News comes from August the 18th, and I'll also put a link to that in the description. And the reason I disagree with it is I don't think that I've always believed this from the word go, from this point to right through all the books that I wrote, that Chris Watts didn't kill any of his family members eyeball to eyeball. In fact, the theory that I've put forward from the beginning was that he attacked Shanann from behind and never actually got sort of a look in her eye, and certainly didn't want to. And he didn't want to he didn't want to confront her. He didn't want to confront her about what he was doing, and he didn't want to confront her about, he didn't want to have that conversation about the divorce and all that kind of thing, and that he was having an affair, which is why he didn't want to face her, which is why he attacked her from behind. So that's the first thing. The other thing is I really don't think that that was the case with the children either. I'm not going to go into detail there, but so this guy, this expert talking on ABC, is making a very over-the-top very over-the-top speculations, which I don't think were borne out in the reality of the case. I also think, given the personality of Chris Watts, an introvert, a reserved guy, a cautious person, he wasn't the kind of person who would want to have that kind of scenario, even given what he was doing. On the other hand, if you take someone like Patrick Frazee and Barry Morphew, I think the situation is quite different. I do think the Patrick Frazee crime was far more gratuitous, but even that crime I don't think was eyeball to eyeball. I think that is an incredible exaggeration, unnecessarily so, from this particular person. And so going back to the blog post from August 20th, I asked sort of rhetorically, was money a factor? And I answered it. Of course it was. But then I said, but millions of couples struggle through financial difficulty without resorting to murder, though perhaps less than the group committing adultery. So I was saying, add together financial difficulty and adultery, and we're starting to get somewhere, but we're still not quite there. So what I was saying as early as August 20th was, infidelity, was that a factor? If it was, that's not enough. That's not enough to go into motive, or probably not enough to go into motive. Was there financial difficulty? Well, that's not enough either, because a lot of couples have it. Add those two together, well, now you're going somewhere along that spectrum, but you're still not close enough. You need some more. What is going on? And I think the answer to that now is you need to have known to some extent what Chris Watts' personality was, and you also needed to know what Shanann's personality was, and you also needed to know the personality of the mistress and how that was going to drive things and give it a peculiar urgency. And then, of course, there was the other element as well. And I described it here as the vital element, of course, is the pregnancy. In the Scott Peterson case, Scott endured the pregnancy for 8 long months until just before Christmas. He figured Christmas was a good time to do things when people would be away or not watching so closely. In the Watts case, 15 weeks proved to be his cutoff date. That was sort of his milestone. And what does the pregnancy reveal about the motive? Simply that her husband's threshold for commitment had been exceeded by a substantial margin. So what I was saying is it's not just a financial commitment and financial overreach that's at issue here. Like Scott, Watts is having a kind of existential crisis. He doesn't want to be married. And I think all of this was borne out in a lot of what he was saying. The other thing that we didn't necessarily know at this point, although I think we could have figured it out from Shanann's own social media, was that she couldn't wait to do the gender reveal. And that was the other thing that was haunting Chris Watts' mind. What happens if Shanann sort of blurts out on Facebook that they're having a baby, they're going to call it this, and basically kind of locking him in to a marriage scenario at the very time that he's trying to get out of it, right? He doesn't want to be a dad. He doesn't want to be burdened or pressured by life-sapping and gut-draining expectations. And this feeling of not wanting to be a dad, it sort of come up fairly recently, at the Great Sand Dunes and so on. We didn't know, but this is what I was saying on August 20th, and then we later found out exactly how and why that was true. So this is what I wrote. He was living a life he didn't want to be living, and it was killing him. He was living a lie, and in his psychology, which I use an expletive to explain this, I said the only way to fix that was by killing them. That way he could get his life back. By taking their lives, he got his. It's transactional, but then capitalist society is rigged that way. Give and take, cash on delivery, no work, no pay. So we're wired to function in a transnational system, but every now and then someone thinks they can outsmart it. I think I meant to say transactional system there. How to get something for nothing, how to get what you really want without paying the price. So in a sense, it is the simple dimension of a man who wants his freedom. He wants to escape the bind he's in. But we have to look at the scale of the things that are tearing at him. Moneylessness, pregnancy, and the raft of commitments and expectations that are part of that. And probably someone else pulling him away from the marriage. Some sort of fairy tale romance that offered him a better alternative happily ever after. These words were all written on August the 20th, right? Then I wrote, when we add all of these together, we need to come up with a simple hypothesis. Why, in a single word, did Watts commit triple, actually quadruple murder of his own family? Greed. He wanted more. So this is not just greed of money, although it included that. It was greed of, he wants his fairy tale. He wants to have a girlfriend without paying the price of alimony and going through the painful process of divorce and doing the work that everybody else does. He wanted a shortcut to that fairy tale, to that happily ever after. He wasn't prepared to pay the price to get what he wanted, so he chose subterfuge so that he could dodge paying for what he wanted, the same way he'd been dodging reality for a year. He wanted to have his cake and eat it, just like Scott Peterson did. I suspect further investigation will show Watts was a spoiled kid and used to entitlements. Was that true? I'm not sure I would say that. I wouldn't say Watts was really spoiled. Were they entitled in terms of the way they were living? Was someone entitled in the way they were living? Was someone spoiled? He didn't like the drudgery of his job. He wanted to convert his family to oil and gold, cash in his chips and start a new life with someone else. I do think that he was feeling drudgery within his marriage. Then I wrote here as well, just in from People magazine, when Nicole Atkinson, Shanann's friend, didn't hear from her, she called Chris Watts to find out what was going on. That's when he made this surprising disclosure to Nicole about his 6-year marriage. Quote, I didn't find out that they were going to separate or anything like that until I called Chris that morning. When I called him and asked him where she was, that's when he told me, and I basically told him that that wasn't my concern at that particular moment, because it wasn't. And that's their business, or that their business was their business, that they would either work it out or they wouldn't. And so Nicole is basically finding the affair irrelevant to what's happened to Shanann. And it's quite an interesting psychology, that her thinking it's irrelevant. And of course it would be irrelevant if Shanann had sort of left on her own, if that makes sense. What would matter is, where is Shanann, kind of thing. And of course the affair then wasn't irrelevant, the separation wasn't irrelevant either. So why would Watts be chomping at the bit to tell someone their marriage was in trouble immediately after his wife was deceased and the kids gone? Why would it not be okay for his own wife to know or say that their marriage was in trouble? And this is another quote. Friends Nicholas and Amanda Thayer said Shanann had voiced concerns about infidelity. It came to her mind that possibly he could be cheating, Amanda Thayer told CBS. Another unnamed friend who spoke anonymously to People made a similar claim. She said the couple was having marital problems and she was getting ready to leave him. And so as early as August the 20th, we already knew about possible infidelity, in other words, rumors of it, which turned out to be true, and then also possible marital problems, rumors of which turned out to be true, and then also possible financial problems, rumors of which turned out to be true. And then, interestingly, on August the 16th, someone said on Twitter that Chris Watts may have killed his wife because she made more money than he did. And so you had some of these myths coming out early on, which were not of any substance at all. But so you had to now tell the difference between what was true and what wasn't. And so the last thing I wrote was, there could be other factors too, depending on issues of Watts' identity. Without knowing his background, his makeup, his backstory, it's difficult to be more accurate. And then I wrote as the final sentence there, now let's see what the prosecutors have to say today. And all of that was written prior to the affidavit came out. We were talking about financial issues. We were talking about infidelity. We were talking about, what kind of person was Chris Watts? What was his background? What was his makeup? And obviously I did mention something along the lines of, he wanted his cake and eat it. He wanted, just above that picture of the house and the teddy bears and the cross, I wrote, and probably someone else pulling him away from the marriage, some sort of fairy tale romance that offered him a better alternative, happily ever after. And so that was my opinion, my attempt to address the question of why, as early as August the 20th, which was around about a week after the events had happened and prior to the arrest affidavit coming out. And so the very next blog post was the release of the arrest affidavit. If we jump to 3 full months into the future from this date, the 19th of November, the day that the district attorney gave his assessment at the sentencing hearing, he provided an answer based on all the information law enforcement had on the motive. So this was 3 full months later, and it turned out to be eerily similar to the one mentioned in this blog post, which was it had something to do with, wanting to create a fairy tale, a happily ever after with this new love. Well, let's listen to D.A. Rourke's words in his own words.
His motive was simple, Your Honor. He had a desire for a fresh start, to begin a relationship with a new love that overpowered all decency and feelings for his wife, his daughters, and unborn son. If he was this happy and wanted a new start, get a divorce.
Interestingly, although the district attorney said they've sort of got a motive, they've got like half of the motive, they didn't have a motive that satisfied them. In other words, they knew the basics, which was that he was very caught up in this affair, but they didn't quite understand it. And I think that has been the ongoing legacy of this case, which is, we understand some of the specifics of the situation, but what was actually going on? In other words, what kind of person are we actually dealing with? What was really what was really going on? And the district attorney talks about how stunning the difference was in the phone data review between what he was doing and saying and what she was doing. And I think that does actually, if you're someone who's still not sure why what happened and how what happened, then by studying the phone data review closely and chronologically, as I did, not only in the narratives, but I also put it on YouTube. You can listen to the hashtag 2 years ago today episodes. I think there are around about 50 of them. You can listen to them on the playlist, and that will demonstrate you if you can't explain to someone why Chris Watts did what he did, you certainly get a sense of it going through it day by day, hearing what they're saying in their own words. So I'm not going to take it further than that. If you're interested in reading this blog post, I'll put a link up in the description. Bear in mind the importance of what we're doing, and I'm going to reiterate it in every episode, is we're not trying to rehash what happened. We're trying to see what we knew very, very early on and what we didn't know. And, how good our analysis is given very little information. And I think you'll agree with me that it was pretty solid as early as August the 20th. But I don't think this was the hardest case in the world to figure out either. Having said that, I think some people have always been very far from knowing what has been going on. They were very far in the beginning, and they're still very far from knowing what's going on. So anyway, in the next episode, I'll be dealing with 3 new insights and touching quite briefly on certain aspects of the arrest affidavit, which came out the very next day. Certainly in terms of the media, it came out on the 21st of August. I think it was released in the afternoon, Monday, the 20th of August, sort of in the late afternoon. So I'll be dealing with that in the next episode in the series dealing with the Shakedown blogs. Once again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment. Wherever you are in the world, stay safe. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys next time.